What is actively feeling? Let's get right into this. I talk about this quite a lot in my videos, and I decided that it's extremely important to make an entirely distinct video on what this is. So on the board, I have a few categories. But before I get into what these categories are and all the qualities that are associated with them, I actually have a pretty clear definition of active feeling written down. So actively feeling refers to the conscious and intentional experience of emotions. It means being aware and intentionally engaging with one's emotions rather than passively experiencing them without conscious awareness. Actively feeling involves paying attention to emotions, accepting them, and expressing them in healthy ways. And I want you, right now, we'll do a quick exercise. I want you to just become aware of the sensations in your hand. And now I want you to attune to the actual sense of feeling intentionally. And notice that there's a distinct shift that has just happened. Prior to that, you were passively feeling them, and it was rather unconscious, and it was kind of just happening. But now you're more aware of them, you're more aware of the sensations in your hand, you're more in tune with them, and you can adjust to them rather than having them just kind of happen. So the point of actively feeling is that we can very clearly understand what is happening to us emotionally. And I want to emphasize that this is a skill that has to be developed. This is not something that you can actually learn by watching this video. Kind of interesting right there. I'm trying to teach you about it, but watching this video isn't actually going to do it for you. So, like learning how to play the piano, you can watch someone play the piano. You can hear people talk about playing the piano. All day you can listen to YouTube videos of people talking about playing the piano. But to actually learn, you have to sit down and actually press the keys and learn some of the theory and actually do it over and over and over again. You got to get the muscle memory. And actively feeling is no different. I can come up here and talk all I want about actively feeling, and you can listen and agree with everything I say. That has nothing to do with whether you are a good active feeler. You can disagree with everything I say as well. And that has nothing to do with actually actively feeling, because actively feeling is direct and experiential. It's something you have to actually do. That's why I use the word actively in actively feeling. So I'm going to get into some of the qualities that are associated with actively feeling. Then I'm going to talk about passively feeling. Then I'm going to talk about some tips, and I'm going to do a little bit of a summary, and then I'll get into some blocks. But first, look at the black part right here. So actively feeling involves awareness. This involves being conscious of one's emotions rather than passively experiencing them. So right now, you can actually just notice that you are aware. And this isn't just a little thing. Humans have a very large potential for self-awareness. We can really transform ourselves using our self-awareness. And like I said, actively feeling is a skill, and so is self-awareness. It has to be intentionally cultivated. And I'm going to have a video on how to cultivate awareness and focus in the future, relatively soon actually. But for now, let's stay on this one. Moving on, we have acceptance. So acceptance involves actively feeling and embracing what is actually there, even if it's painful or uncomfortable, without judgment or resistance. And I'm going to get into what resistance is a little bit later on in the video. I'm going to talk about it when I get to the blocks. Next, we have expression, or I'll do self-compassion next. That's the order I put it up in here. So self-compassion involves approaching emotions with a sense of kindness, understanding, and actual love for yourself, rather than criticism or judgment, like, stupid sadness, stupid anger. So it's a very different way of actually relating to yourself and actually speaking to yourself internally. Next, we have processing, which involves reflecting on the origins of your emotions, connecting them with your behaviors and a lot of your experience and thoughts. So right off the bat, I want to say that all of these qualities are working in combination with one another. It's not like you can pick your favorite three and then, run away with it. These are really all working in combination with another. So moving on to expression, this involves talking. This involves physical exercise. This involves maybe creating art. Any way of expressing how you feel externally as a way to connect with yourself. So one of the key things here that distinguishes active feeling from passive feeling is connection. I want you to notice that what all of these are essentially doing are connecting you to life. They're connecting you to your direct experience, and they are not disconnecting you from them. You are not disassociating from it. The whole point of this is to come into contact with what is presently happening without avoiding it, because we have a massive habit of running away from ourselves, avoiding ourselves, distracting ourselves from ourselves. And actively feeling is about exposing all of these sort of mechanisms. It's about exposing all of this. Now, back to this, we have, I believe, adaptive. So this involves using emotions to navigate life's challenges and experiences rather than just by being controlled by them. Our emotions are actually constantly talking to us. They're communicating with us. They're actually telling us very profound things. And when we have a lot of repressed emotions, like everyone does, it's very difficult to actually listen to our emotional system in a clear way. So actively feeling is a way of slowly but surely processing a lot of the most unprocessed feelings inside of us so that we can clean up our sort of internal reservoir of emotional garbage, so that we can actually begin to listen to our intuition. We can listen to our emotional system. Our body is actually not tense and rigid and struggling against itself. Instead, it's loose and open and loving, and actually feels like a more healthy environment rather than one that is struggling against itself in various places. Like, look at your gut right now. It's probably tense. One ab is fighting another ab, and it's a very unusual thing. So bring some active feeling to that. Next, we have resilience, which involves developing healthy coping skills to manage emotions, even in the face of adversity. So when something is difficult, when you have a painful emotion arise, instead of running away from it, turning on the TV, distracting yourself with what's happening around you, you actually bring your attention to yourself and you actively feel what is happening. And you try your best, your sincere best, to embrace what is happening inside of you, even if it's painful. And if you can't do it, and you've really tried your best, you've done a great job. So this is a skill that has to be learned. I gotta really emphasize that. And as you practice it, actively feeling will become very profound. This will radically reshape how you relate to yourself, how you relate to other people, because a lot of how we relate to ourselves and other people, and even entertainment, a lot of our life is dictated, a lot of our decisions are dictated by our emotions. Whether we like to believe that or not, our emotions are very fundamental to how we make decisions in life. And our decision making isn't a purely rational thing, but there's a lot of underlying emotions that also drive us to do certain things, whether that's get into a relationship or distract ourselves with entertainment. For example, I'll use a relationship for example. We can feel lonely, and that can drive us to want to get into a relationship. And we can also feel very connected to someone. And that can drive us to get into a relationship with that person. And both can exist at the same time. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Now, moving on, or not so much moving on, I'm going to talk about meditation very quickly. And I'm going to have more videos on it in the future. But this is probably the best habit that you can do daily for 5 minutes, 1 minute, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 3 minutes, the whole day, a whole 24-hour clock. You can do it, and you can just sit down and dedicate time to developing this skill of actively feeling. And you can really come into contact with some of the parts of yourself that are struggling right now. And you can actually feel them in your body. You can feel muscles fighting other muscles. You can feel raised shoulders, tense jaw, closed heart, tense gut, tense whatever, tense forehead. So moving on to passive. So passively feeling refers to the experience of emotions without conscious awareness, attention, or intention. And this basically involves these 4 things. This is really some of the most massive stuff. Avoidance being one of the biggest. And I can really put distraction on here as well, but I've decided to talk about distraction later on. I've given it a whole section I'm going to talk about for a while because it's probably the biggest block to actively feeling. But for now, I'll talk about avoidance. So this refers to suppressing and running away from emotions rather than acknowledging their existence and accepting them and observing them and really coming into a sense of contact with them. Reactivity involves being controlled by our emotions, and that just means that, of course, we get emotionally hijacked in the moment, which is okay if it happens. It's very normal. You don't have to feel ashamed of yourself, but it's important to actually reflect upon what is driving you to be reactive, what emotions are there, how do they actually feel, and then actually feel them. What beliefs are associated with these emotions? Are they good emotions? Are they bad emotions? And really, what are some underlying beliefs that you have that also give rise to a lot of these feelings? Disconnection is another one. So passively feeling often involves disconnection from emotions and a lack of awareness or understanding of their origins and significance. And this is a very large thing that you are probably doing right now. A lot of how we relate to the actual sensations in our body, we like to avoid them and run away from them because really our inner world and our whole emotional system is very threatening. As odd as that may sound, it's a very unknown place to you if you haven't spent a long time investigating it. And even if you have spent a long time investigating it, there's still a lot of unknown happening within you. And to really begin to look at some of the stuff that you have been hiding from yourself for years, this is not an easy task. This is a very courageous thing to do. The next one is numbing. So passively feeling often involves unhelpful coping strategies like substance abuse, avoidance, distraction, or overeating, for example, eating to numb yourself, stuff like that. I don't think I have to go into too much detail with that, but numbing even involves watching too much YouTube. You're using it to avoid and, numb how you're feeling. So passively feeling involves, or can lead, to emotional dysregulation, interpersonal problems, mental health issues, and can limit one's ability to navigate life's challenges and experiences in an effective way. So moving towards active feeling with the awareness, acceptance, expression, and processing of emotions can promote emotional regulation, self-awareness, satisfying relationships, and well-being. And I want to emphasize that this is not an easy thing to do. That if you actually do this stuff, like you set time aside every day, you book a meditation retreat, you read books on psychotherapy, you even talk to a psychotherapist. This is not an easy thing to do. This is a very challenging thing to do, actually, because we are fundamentally changing who it is that we are experiencing ourselves to be. Our actual sense of identity is going to be rewired after this process. I actually talk about that later on. Resistance, resistance to change, really. We are clinging on to a lot of the beliefs about who we are, a lot of the emotional patterns that we believe define who we are. Even all the patterns that create our suffering, we cling to them because they give us a sense of security. And to begin to let a lot of these things go, and move more into the unknown, move away from our comfort, and really expand our actual, comfort zone. Obviously, that is not easy. And specifically, I'm referring to the comfort zone of our inner world, not the corny comfort zone of like, if you're scared to go bungee jumping, woohoo, but more so the actual comfort zone of our subjective experience. We very deeply avoid our subjective experience. We deeply avoid our direct perceptions of reality. We very deeply avoid our feeling, the pure feeling of our body. If you just bring awareness into your body and leave it there, you'll notice that you'll find some conflict very fast if you look for it, that you can't seem to stop. And within that conflict lies past trauma, a bunch of repressed emotions, a bunch of stuff that you've just ignored about yourself and you've cast them away. But really it hasn't went anywhere. And a lot of this stuff has actually been, whether you know it or not, and whether you admit it or not, it's actually been making a lot of your life decisions for you. The people you get into relationships with, the people or really the places that you want to go in life, the careers that you find appealing, the habits that you do day to day, whether you eat healthy or not, whether you exercise or not, whether you feel motivated or not. I want to give you some steps on how to actively feel. So right off the bat, just pay attention to emotions. That's it. Just pay attention to them. Just acknowledge them when they arise, and acknowledge what's happening right now, what you're feeling right now. Even if you say you feel nothing, really you feel somewhat numb. Maybe in your hand you feel a lot of sensations, but then in your gut you don't feel much, and in other places you don't really feel much. Some places might feel kind of dead and just numb and void of any life, whereas other places might feel a little bit more of an energetic flow happening. Moving on, we can accept what's happening. Regardless of what is happening, we can actually accept it. We can accept whether we feel a little bit sad, a little bit lonely, happy, up, down, left, right, whatever it is. We can allow ourselves to experience what is presently happening. And this is a big one. I really want to make this practical. I want you to notice when an uncomfortable emotion arises. I want you right now to search in your body for some kind of conflict, maybe in your gut, just tension. And I want you to bring awareness into it and keep it there. And I want you to notice there's a sense of struggle with keeping it there, and how easy it is to let it run somewhere else, and how you actively have to keep it there and continuously process what is actually happening there. And how when a more uncomfortable emotion arises, let's say like overwhelming anger, overwhelming sadness, where does your attention go? Does it go into an external object to try and make you feel better? Or does it go directly to what is happening? Do you move away from your pain, or do you move towards your pain? And it's important just to be honest about it, not to shame ourselves for whatever we do, but just to be honest about it so that we can see clearly what it is that we are actually doing in the present moment. We can also identify the emotions, label the emotions to help us understand them and process them. So we can label them, okay, sadness. Okay, how does sadness feel? And really dive into the direct experience of it. Really feel the impermanence and the constantly changing sensations of what's happening. Feel it as a sort of energetic pattern, an emotional pattern that is actually going on inside of you. It's a very alive thing. It's not like sadness is like this dead thing. There's a lot of complexity and nuance that is happening inside of you that we don't even fully grasp as a species, really. I want you to notice and get in touch with how the sensations are constantly changing. There's that flow coming and going. And just get in touch with that and keep letting that happen and actively feeling that. So identifying the emotions is important, labeling them, and then moving into the actual direct experience of them. Because our label, sadness, is very different from the direct experience of sadness. What we call sadness is not sadness. It's just a label for a particular emotional pattern. The actual emotional pattern itself and how it feels in the direct experience of it is distinct from the label, the conceptualization that we have associated with it. Moving on, we can express emotions. We can find healthy ways to express emotions. And this involves talking to people. This is a very good one. I love just talking when I'm relating to people and I want to connect with them, for example. If there's an emotion that is blocking my ability to connect with them, I'm anxious, I'm scared, whatever it is, I actually like saying it to them, because then we're more on the same page and then the connection actually starts building. So talking to people, journaling, and engaging in physical activities is really important. Moving on, we can reflect, we can consider how the emotions are connected to thoughts, behaviors, and experiences. We can practice self-care as well. That's another big one. And I want you to know that actively feeling can be challenging. This will be challenging. If you've never done it in your life, this is going to be really challenging. And it's important to actually approach this process with a sense of acceptance for what is happening inside of yourself. Basically, self-acceptance, self-compassion, regardless of what is happening inside of yourself. Now, moving on, I want to talk about some ways that you can move towards painful emotions instead of avoiding them. Because what I'm referring to in this video is mainly the avoidance of our emotional pain. And this is a huge problem within the modern world. And we do not live in an emotionally intelligent world. That is not the case. We actually live in a very emotionally unintelligent world. And emotional intelligence, very deep emotional intelligence, is quite rare. We're not encouraged to investigate our emotions or become deeply emotionally intelligent by schools, by the people around us. For the most part, that just doesn't happen. There's a slow change, it appears, towards that, but for the most part, we are not taught properly about how emotions work, why emotions arise, how we suppress them, how to come into contact with what we've hidden from ourselves. This is not taught, not emphasized. So right off the bat, we can practice mindfulness. This is an insanely important one, and this is not hippy-dippy, new age, mainstream culture mindfulness like that. You know, it's like a trend. But really, this is just direct observation of the present moment. We have to be able to directly observe what is happening and intentionally do so. And meditation is really just that. You're just directly observing what is actually happening right now inside of me and dedicating time to giving yourself the attention that you actually need to be well. Moving on, embracing vulnerability. So this is about allowing yourself to be open to the experience of emotions, even if they are painful. Reframing the experience works as well. This means that we can view this as an opportunity for growth and self-investigation rather than something like, this emotion is bad or to be avoided and be just afraid of really ourselves. Seeking support is really big. Seeking, let's say, a therapist if you need it, care from a significant other, talking to friends. Of course, this is big. Engaging in self-care, like good sleep, good hygiene, eating the right foods. This is all very important as well. If you eat bad foods, you're dirty, and you don't sleep, you're not going to be able to do what I'm saying. You're just not going to be able to do it. You're going to be too numb, too dull. You're not going to be focused or sharp. This kind of stuff is very important. So processing emotions as well through writing is massive. We want to actually write down what we're feeling. This is really big. Just sitting down, actively feeling, and then writing. This is pretty important. And really, you can write about your emotions and use that to connect with the actual direct experience of emotions. So I don't want you to write and get lost and too distracted by just writing. You can write slow, write with intention, write with a sense of ease and overall grace. And what I mean by that is not ease and grace in, like you have to feel a particular way, you have to feel at ease, and then we associate that with a particular feeling, but more so coming into acceptance, taking it slow, actively feeling, and not trying to avoid, and writing down what's presently happening. Like, I feel fear and I'm avoiding it. I feel anxious and I'm avoiding it. I feel tension and I'm avoiding it. And we can get clarity through this. Now, moving on, we can try exposure therapy. This one, really you might, really depends on your situation. So you can actually intentionally put yourself in situations that trigger these emotions in you so that they can come out for you to be observed. And a fantastic example of this can be like, a fear of bees, for example, and then intentionally putting yourself in a situation where you are going to be exposed to a bunch of bees. So then you can really let these fears come out of you. And do this with caution. Don't overwhelm yourself, but also give yourself a good amount of fear so that you can really see what the direct experience of fear is and really come into contact with it and not avoid a lot of these feelings. So it's important, once again, to remember that this is very courageous. Okay, I got to keep emphasizing this. This is not an easy thing to do, and that really no one is doing this. For the most part, no one does this. For the most part, people do a lot of this, and then they get stuck in this, unfortunately. And then this is somewhat rare amongst humans, and I don't say that in a very condescending way, but it just seems as though this is just not the case with most humans. People aren't intentionally doing this kind of stuff, which is okay. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but it's going to lead to a lot of this. So the biggest block to actively feeling, we're going to talk about blocks now in the red. The biggest block is most likely distraction. And I actually have quite a lot written down on just distraction, because the world that we presently live in is so overstimulating that we don't even know what it's like to go a week without being stimulated in a deeply artificial way. We have so much distraction, so much technology, so much music, so many parties, so much, alcohol, so much sweet food, so much fatty food, so much whatever it is. You get the point. So the biggest block for you will most likely be some form of distraction. And distractions can be probably the most obvious thing when you are really looking for them. And this is where it's really important to use a journal to develop clarity. Notice that when you distract yourself, you are feeling a particular way. When you run to the fridge to overeat, you might be anxious or angry or sad, And this is a distraction from these emotions. It's an unhealthy coping mechanism. When you watch way too much TV, when you are drinking too much, when you're whatever form of distraction, when you're on your phone way too much, notice that there's an underlying emotion, boredom, anxiety, fear, anger, sadness, that drives you to do certain behaviors. And that when you're doing the distraction, it's covering that up, but not in a very good way. Because the second the distraction is over, you're kind of left numb, more reactive. It's basically got a lot worse. It's like you've just walked up to a beehive and have just shaken it. And really, you can't suppress these emotions. It's a deeply unsustainable long-term strategy. It simply will not work because they don't actually go anywhere. Like, they don't leave you. Your emotions are actually stored in you. All of the stuff that you've repressed and haven't processed is stored in you and still plays itself out on subtle levels and comes out at times when you might least expect it. So let's talk a bit about what can distract us. Technology being probably the biggest one. Spending too much time on electronic devices, smartphones, computers, can make it difficult for us to acknowledge our emotions, face them, feel them, and really just focus on them. Attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and emotional issues are increasing. And really, actively feeling, another quality I can put is focus, because it requires a concentration on ourself. Moving on is busyness, filling up your schedule with bullshit and disguising that as though you're being productive, but really you're not actually leaving a chunk of time for processing what's happening in you and investigating yourself. So busyness, basically filling up your schedule with activities and tasks that can make it difficult to find time and space to focus on emotions. It's too easy to say, I don't have time for this. I don't have 5 minutes to sit down and meditate. Nonsense. You have 5 minutes per day to intentionally and actively and with a sincere heart investigate what's happening inside you. You just choose not to. Really, you have the time, but we just don't care. Moving on, substance abuse. This one is going to be fairly big. Alcohol is going to be big, but really, this is a tough one because substance abuse really deserves its own video, and addiction and this whole thing. This is a whole other category, whole other can of worms that I'm not really going to get into here, but of course, this is a massive block. Entertainment, so engaging in excessive entertainment, watching 4 hours of TV, playing 10 hours of video games, watching basically way too much movies or something like that, distracts us from our emotions and really disconnects us from life. A lot of entertainment, a lot of our technology is really disconnecting us from life. Not that it can't do the opposite, but that the way we are relating to it, we are using it as a tool to disconnect us from ourselves, which we have to see and be honest about that. Oh yeah, I'm using my smartphone right now to disconnect me from my life, my feelings, myself, right now, this present moment. Another one is avoidance. So really you can just get a good look, nice good look. Avoidance as well. So procrastination is obviously a big one. And basically just not confronting something when it's appropriate to. And I like that word. I'm going to re-say that. I like that whole sentence really. Not confronting something when it's appropriate to. And there are times where it is very clearly appropriate to confront some kind of emotion inside of us And our body is really communicating to us, hey, like, look at me, it's tense, it's rigid, it seems fixed, it's fighting itself. There's something there to address. Or we feel some sort of overwhelming feeling, and then we quickly, either panic and distract and avoid, get reactive, or we actively feel and investigate and question and remain with it and focus on it. Bring all of this to the situation. Now, I want to really emphasize the importance of setting aside time every day for this. This isn't going to be a 5-minute thing, 10-minute thing. This is your life. You have an entire emotional system that you have to master, or else you are screwed. That is a big point. If you do not come into a deep sense of understanding and contact and love for your emotions, you're going to have the opposite. You're going to have delusion, you're going to have misunderstanding, you're going to have disconnection, and you're going to have self-hatred by definition. You're just going to have the opposite. All of what I am saying are actually skills that need to be intentionally worked on over and over and over and over again. So some other blocks involve fear. This is obviously a huge one. We actually get scared by our emotions. Like I was saying, we have a comfort zone within our subjective experience. We like to look at certain things about ourselves, but not other things. We like to usually think of ourselves as heroes and good, noble citizens who are honest and this and this and this. We like to paint ourselves in like a nice bright light. But when it comes to a lot of our personal bullshit, how we're dishonest to ourselves, how we avoid ourselves, how we distract ourselves, how we at times don't even care about the truth. We want to manipulate and control and just get our way. We don't like to look at ourselves in that way. Even though all of this is true, we're doing this, we like to just avoid that, act like it's not there, and then just really think of ourselves as this noble human being. And I'm sure you probably have a lot of fantastic qualities, but I'm sure you probably have a lot of very deeply rooted emotional issues that need investigating. And that's not an easy thing to admit about yourself. Be like, oh man, like, oh crap, like I have a lot of emotional problems that I have to investigate and no one has taught me how. And what, this random guy on YouTube is teaching me how? It's a pretty weird situation to be in. But nonetheless, that may be the case. So fear is huge. We actually have to face what's happening in us. Really, we fear being overwhelmed by our emotions. We might fear going insane. We might fear that they are too intense for us to actually handle. And this might prevent us from actually looking at them. Lack of self-awareness is next. We may lack the actual awareness to be able to understand what's happening inside of ourselves. So not being aware of them at all is probably a huge problem. Not having the skills to identify and label them can make it difficult towards moving towards them actively and being in the actual sensory experience of feeling. Remember the practice we did. Remember the practice we did at the beginning of the video with the hand. Intentionally and consciously experiencing the physical sensations in your hand as fully as you can. Being aware of as many sensations as you possibly can versus like zoning out in thoughts or eating food. And then, in the back of your mind, there's sensations there, but you're not actively engaging with them. You feel disconnected from them. Unhelpful coping strategies is another huge one, like overeating, substance abuse, avoidance, and basically various forms of, distraction, entertainment, stuff like that. Not too much new stuff there. Another good one is doubt. This is actually a huge one. So basically forms of negative self-talk, like I'm weak or I can't handle this, things like that, things that make us not want to be vulnerable and face what's happening. And we can actively question our doubts. Doubt is like a cognitive form of fear, really. We can doubt our doubts. We can actively question them. We don't have to believe the thought stream that's just happening and happening. We don't have to believe everything that we think. We can actively engage with our thoughts and question them, and then kind of look and laugh at them, like, why the hell did that even happen? Why did that thought come into my head? And I took it so seriously and I believed it, but when I just do a little bit of questioning, it just kind of dismantles. It's like I constructed this belief out of nowhere and then I just dismantled it very quickly. Another good one is past trauma. Basically, this can make it very difficult to face emotions and can trigger memories and feelings of fear or distress. And trauma is a very dramatic word. But really, everyone has varying degrees of trauma. We have a lot of parts of ourselves that we've disassociated from, hidden from ourselves, repressed, denied, avoided, whatever, etc. And all of this relates to trauma. There's been some kind of experience that has overwhelmed us, frightened us, and we ran away, disassociated from it, avoided our feelings, and that gets stored in like an internal warehouse inside of us, basically an internal reservoir of bullshit. And we have to clean that up because you don't really want an internal reservoir of shit inside of you. And it's there. Another good one is lack of support. This can be a massive block. A lot of people are very social. I am very social. I love talking to people about how I feel. When I'm talking to, anyone, like I said, I'm trying to connect with them. I like telling them how I feel so then, we can be on the same page and we can, connect. Like if I have anxiety, for example, or I'm nervous and it's blocking my ability to connect with them, I can say like, I'm feeling kind of nervous right now. I just, really with someone you trust and you can be open with. Both people have to be acting with integrity. So yeah, basically, try and get support from people who are intelligent and you can trust and you can be open with and who will not shame you and who you can be very honest with. So that can involve mental health professionals, family, friends, whoever. Your grandparents, don't be afraid to go talk to them. I'm kidding. Maybe, but maybe not. Another good one is resistance to change. So being resistant to change is a huge one because when we are engaging in this process of actively feeling, we are bringing about some kind of emotional change. We are getting very clear about what's happening inside of us emotionally. We are being very honest about it, and this alone will transform us because we are, for the most part, very emotionally unintelligent, very personally dishonest, and very avoidant of ourselves. And really, to become conscious of all these things and to have deep personal honesty, deep personal integrity, deep emotional intelligence, deep self-clarity, deep intrapersonal skills, these are, like I said, skills to be developed that make very deep changes to the actual sense of who you are and the actual experience of yourself. So being resistant to change and unwilling to challenge long-standing beliefs and behaviors can make it difficult to move towards emotions. And I want to say that all of these blocks can be overcome with practice, self-awareness, and support from trusted individuals. So really do not underestimate speaking to people. Do not underestimate that one. This one is huge. We're a very social species and we can actually use each other to grow and develop and can, reflect each other's trauma and emotional issues and patterns. We can really use ourselves very deeply, especially intimate relationships. They are the best for this. We can use each other to really wake ourselves up out of our delusional conditioning. Or we can use each other as distractions for becoming more and more asleep and more reactive and more clueless about what really matters to us and really about ourselves and our nature. Now that's it for this video. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'll be glad to help. And other than that, take it easy.